It's time for the birth of the new golden era. Welcome to Shattering the Matrix. Your host, Ari Kopel, and co-host, Serena, bring you information that will shatter the matrix and shine light on the conditions and forces that are keeping the planet in third-dimensional density and inspire solutions and positive outcomes. Humanity needs to step up and desire to be freed from the darkness of this prison. No one, no thing outside of ourselves will do this for us. Ari Kopel helps us step into our power and authority that will shatter this prison. Now, be prepared to open up your consciousness, become aware, and emerge victorious by standing in our divine power and divine authority in unison, co-creating a new Earth. Now, here's your host of Shattering the Matrix, Ari Kopel, and co-host Serena.
Hi, this is Ari Kopel with Shattering the Matrix. Today, I am basically talking to you again from the Matrix. I can't seem to get out, but we have, of course, my wonderful friend and co-host Serena with us, and then we have our very special guest today, Robert M. Stanley. And Robert is formerly a corporate journalist for Honda Research and Development in Torrance, California. Robert is also currently the author of Close Encounters on Capitol Hill and Covert Encounters in Washington, D.C., and he's also the host of the Unicus Radio Hour. He has also served as a correspondent for America's Morning News and America's Radio News Network. And in 2001, he became the webmaster of unicusmagazine.com, and in 2013, he became the owner and operator of the Unicus Radio Network. Robert has also traveled to more than 50 countries and has read hundreds of books and thousands of articles during his lifelong pursuit of modern and ancient mysteries. And over the past 30 years, Robert's quest for unique ideas and information has led him to research and write about many controversial topics. His ongoing investigations have been featured on television, radio, and in print. So, Robert, welcome to our program.
Well, good morning, Ari and Serena. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming to our program. It's such an honor. We have a wonderful, I would say, about 2 hours ahead of us with just jam-packed with information, because Robert has done his research, has done his homework with this. And we have just a situation here on planet Earth where, a lot of people are really not aware, Robert, of, what's probably going on behind the scenes, shall we say. And, I was talking to Serena a little while ago in reference to the fact that, she and I have made a commitment, like you have, to bring this information forth to humanity, to as many people that are receptive to it and willing to look at it, as ugly as it may seem. And what has happened, though, is that we're noticing how these forces, if you want to call them that, Archons, whatever we want to call them, they're messing with us personally in many different ways. For example, I personally love to, I know how to protect myself, and I do all these things in order to do that. But when they can't get to me personally, I'm noticing how they're getting to my family members. And they're getting to my family members, and via them, they're affecting me, also. So I wanted to address that with you to get your insight as to, is this like a normal thing that have you experienced this? What is your take on that?
Yes, unfortunately, that's part of the process. They are treating us all like cattle. And whenever they're hungry, they basically provoke us to generate negative energy that they feed off of in that regard. They are parasitic. But what makes it more complicated is that, so even if you're clear, you're surrounded by people, not everyone, but quite a lot of people on this planet, in my opinion, are possessed, and they don't even know it. Now, there's obviously various degrees of possession by these entities. It's an infection, okay? So some people are badly infected, let's put it that way, and are sort of an extension, I think, in this dimension physically, they act as an extension of these parasitic entities, and they cause all kinds of havoc in our lives. And so everybody's vulnerable in that regard. And yes, they do get really angry. These entities, these parasitic entities, are intelligent enough to know when we are resisting or formulating any kind of resistance to them. They get very upset. So they try to retaliate against us.
Wow, that is crazy. Yeah, I have, again, I've noticed that, not only, like I said, with me personally, because I'm watchful and I'm mindful now. I know exactly what I'm looking for. Well, maybe not exactly, but I already know that there's a certain pattern of, the kind of thoughts that are in my head that I'm going, my goodness, that's not mine. And then just yesterday, I was just sitting down, relaxing on my sofa. And all of a sudden, Robert, I started getting this horrific feeling in my solar plexus area of this horrendous fear out of nowhere. And I'm going, that's not mine. That feeling is not mine. There's nothing that put it there. And so I basically had to tell it to go away in a not a very nice way. Using the kind of...
It seems irrational. I know. I've experienced it too. And you got to understand that the solar plexus is the second brain for the body, and that's one of the places they will attack. If they can't manipulate your mind, they will certainly start attacking you through the solar plexus, if not both. Okay, because everybody's had that feeling, that sort of sick feeling in their stomach, that tightness, that sort of like, oh my God, I'm getting an ulcer kind of thing.
Right.
Sometimes it's just indigestion. Sometimes there's a real reason for that. It's sort of protection. I know we all have an inner guidance system, but these creatures actually know how to override that, and that's a vulnerable point for them to manipulate mankind. And some people have asked me, say, what are you trying to do? Create some sort of scapegoat, excuse all bad behavior, and blame it on some entity that we can't even see? And my response to that is absolutely not. In fact, the more we know about these creatures, the greater the responsibility we have for our actions, especially our emotional state, as you just described.
Yeah.
Once you know that you're being manipulated, it's even more important for you to take every step possible, or even ask for help to get your emotions under control.
Yep. And I have noticed that they do, they kind of like target people that tend to be over emotional, or they're more emotional than use logic, because I do have a family member like that, and it's pure emotion to the point that there's nothing I can say to shake that person back into sanity. And so what happens is that the decision-making process becomes really faulty, and it just creates havoc in the household. So yeah, I was...
That's the goal. That's the whole goal. Like I said, even if you're not directly being manipulated, indirectly you can be and are being manipulated by people around you all the time. And this is why we have to be on guard. This is the whole reason we're even talking about this.
Absolutely.
Is so that we can be more resolute in our ability to defend ourselves and assist others when they ask for it. I mean, a person who's in the midst of being manipulated, they really are unreachable. Sort of like, and I know this is probably not the best analogy, but it's the only one I have, is a domestic dog. Beautiful animal. I love dogs, okay?
Yeah.
But if a dog becomes infected by rabies,
sure.
It is no longer, it won't respond to your commands. It's no longer a loving pet or a companion. It becomes a threat.
Yep.
To your well-being. So, and I mean, I'm sure that a dog that's infected doesn't want to be vicious, but it really has no choice at that point. The infection is taken over.
Right. And at that point, it's probably no longer your dog either. It's probably just a physical container, but it might not be even your dog.
Unfortunately not.
I know.
Unfortunately, yeah, it only looks like the dog that you knew, but everything about the personality has been taken over. So you're right. Look, I know people are not dogs, but we are domestic animals in some regard. And one of the things I'm noticing here is this trend that not only are they dumbing us down through the media, but they're also trying to constantly put a price on everything, even people's junk that's left over in a storage unit somewhere. It's like, oh wow, it's worth hundreds of dollars, and I mean, who cares? And the other thing is weird is I find that there these shows where people are running around, men obviously, running around pretending like they're surviving, but they're being followed by a camera crew. They got producers, and you know what I'm saying? They're really, there's an effort to make mankind, and it's nothing new, but I mean, they have been lying to us. They can't tell the truth. Right. They can't risk being exposed. They don't want to come out, and so they're constantly behind the scenes manipulating us for their own benefit. Like I said, keeping us divided against each other is part of the plan. It keeps us weak, keeps them strong. Provoking us is another thing. But I do think, I'm finding anyway, that there are, even though there's only a handful of us that are actually out there speaking about this, the information is actually gaining traction. And I expect this year especially is going to be great strides are going to be made towards awakening people. Because I see at some point it's not just like, oh, we've got a problem. Okay, then it graduates to, okay, now what are we going to do about it? Right. What is the best course of action to rid ourselves of these parasites?
So, for the people that are new to this, that might be listening to the show, what are we talking about? What are these things? Are they forces? Are they creatures? Or what are we talking about?
Yeah, somebody had mentioned this about Paul Levy's books, and he describes them as a non-local force that we generated in our subconscious mind, and I totally disagree. They are entities. I've got pictures of them on my website, and those pictures coincide directly with what people have described seeing. Okay, so not everybody can see them, but that doesn't mean they can't be seen or photographed. And that's one of the reasons I decided to go forward with reporting this as a fact, because for the longest time I just wanted to talk about it as fiction. And speaking of fiction, since you talk about The Matrix, that movie actually was a very good analogy of what we are to them. Yep. We're their battery source. We are their energy, and while they're here, I don't think they came from this universe, and I really don't think they came from our subconscious.
No, I don't think so.
They play on that they dwell there, but they're and they manipulate us from there. I mean, everything I found out about them is, and it's really interesting too. I've been working on a new book about this, and I know a lot of people are writing about it, but it seems like every culture has some sort of knowledge of these creatures, and yet we act like, typically the majority of people act like they don't exist. And so this was part of the illusion, like they say in The Matrix. People are oblivious to what their role is in all of this, and to these parasites. And I believe that that's one of the advantages that these creatures have over us, is that they were able to hide and operate covertly, and so it's the greatest advantage that they have right now. But as they're being exposed, I do expect them to do things that are like desperate. Yep. As they start to become more and more exposed, I think that they're going to act more and more desperately. And so again, it's one of the challenges is for us humans is to remain calm and not engage on that level, the cruelty, all the negative emotions, the corruption, and that's really feeding the enemy, in my opinion. So it's like I said, it starts with an educational conversation, but at some point it'll move to an organizational process where enough people are really going to say, that's it, I've had enough, and we're going to stand united against these individuals or whatever they are. I mean, like I said, this is part of the problem. They don't stand alone. They have literally taken over certain humans, excuse me, as well as human and humanoid extraterrestrials.
Wow.
Excuse me.
That is absolutely crazy.
Well, it is, but it's, I mean, just look, it is sounding weird and crazy, but one of the people that contacted me as I was reporting on this is he's a practicing clinical therapist. I mean, in prison settings with people who are diagnosed as schizophrenic or psychopathic. And he learned 30 years ago that, quite accidentally, that the voices that these people are hearing were or are external to them. It's not a biochemical or electrochemical defect. These things really are external. And the other thing I found that was really interesting in his description of some of these people are that some of them actually can see the entities. Typically, though, that they are on methamphetamine.
Right.
I don't know exactly how that works or why, but he also described that some of the people who are possessed know it, and that they're having somewhat of a symbiotic relationship in that they know that these entities actually will give them clairvoyance or superhuman strength. But of course, there's a price. So this goes back to the whole mythology of that selling your soul to the devil.
Yeah.
Okay, that apparently on some level that is possible and really does happen or has happened. So anyway, it's what I've told people this for years is the truth really is stranger than fiction.
Yeah.
Much stranger.
And it's not pretty, is it? Sometimes.
No, but we have to face this in order to move forward. These things are truly inhibiting our true potential. Is not being our ability to grow.
Yep.
As seeds of light, as souls, is inhibited by these entities.
Yep.
It's sort of like a plant that's diseased. It can't really blossom and become whatever. It's just it can't reach its full potential,
Exactly.
And that's really what we're facing here.
Yeah. Now these people who have seen these entities, and I'm curious because I've obviously seen the pictures on your site and all, and some of them, of course, they look like these big globs of amoebas or parasitic looking things. Now, and then there are the other ones that, of course, look demonic. They look demonic. In your opinion, who is who in this whole scheme of things? Are the amoeba ones in charge of the demonic ones, or the demonic ones on top of those? Who is what?
It's a food chain.
Yeah.
It's like the food chain that we know of, except that yes, those amoeba-like looking things are the foundation of the dark side's food chain.
Wow.
And so they drive once they possess the higher life forms, or I should say the more complex life forms, including animals. If you look in the Bible, supposedly when Jesus met a man who was possessed, and he really had superhuman strength, and he was possessed by demons. And so when the demons were cast out, Jesus allegedly cast him out, multiple demons out of the man into a herd of pigs. The herd of pigs went crazy and jumped off a cliff. So it's not impossible.
Yeah.
It's not unheard of. And like I say, there's a problem that we have. Not only do we have humans here that are possessed, and most of them I think are completely unaware of it. I mean, for example, the boy in 1948, the story of this boy, we don't really know his real name, but he was living in Georgetown, right there in Washington, D.C. When he became possessed, he didn't know that he was possessed. His family and his people were telling him, you're acting really weird at night. And he goes, I don't know what you're talking about. They're that masterful at manipulation that they literally were using this boy I think he was 13 years old. It was 1948, and it made the newspapers, and ultimately that became the story we know as The Exorcist.
Yeah.
William Blatty just took that right out of the newspapers and created a so-called fictional account of a real event, and it took multiple attempts to rid that boy or clear him. The problem I have with exorcism by the Catholic Church is these things. I know recently Father Gabriel Amorth has said that he's sending them to hell. Okay, well then why are they on the rise?
Right.
I mean, if you're really doing a good job of it, how come these things are actually increasing in their numbers? Exorcisms. It obviously, in my opinion, it's not effective. And also, in fact, he recently, the most recent statement he made publicly is that he kind of admitted that the church is much like the pedophiles that are in the church. They're sort of looking the other way and covering it up and paying off families. They're doing the same thing for the exorcisms. They're not all being treated seriously, and you can only guess why. But I mean, my opinion is that the Vatican, Rome, Washington D.C., these are all sort of fortresses of darkness here. And so that the entities know where they can go to manipulate key individuals and organizations so that the rest of us will fall in line, more or less, to serve this like I said, this parasitic, the Matrix. It really is. They're the ones who designed this. And I got to tell you, it's not that new. I mean, in the greater scheme of things, I see this infection as being relatively recent in cosmological terms. It's it didn't start on this world, but by the time it came here, this world was already a paradise. It was perfect. All life on it had achieved its true potential. I mean, it was being cared for and guarded by a group of advanced human divine entities that were extensions of the God of this universe. And, if you look into the fossil record, everything was huge, relatively speaking. We're dwarfs. All life now is dwarfed because of the corruption. When these entities came here, like I said, when they hitched a ride, what happened was, my understanding is, they hitched a ride on some of our ancestors who were spacefaring. Those ancestors had gone into a place or through a wormhole or something that was essentially off limits, but they decided you know how people are. Sometimes they feel invincible and they're like, oh, I'll be fine. We'll be fine. Come on, let's just go explore this. When they came back out, they were completely demented.
Oh, wow.
Because they were possessed. They literally had brought an infection. They were infected, and they brought the infection into this universe. Because my understanding is that there are an infinite number of universes in the multiverse, and they're constantly being born, too, which is interesting to me, that the God of this universe actually was a soul much like you and I, that literally became, at some point in time, that soul became mature enough to literally blossom or bloom into a universe of its own. See, that's the thing. That's who we really are. I mean, because it's a holographic fractal, we are seeds of light that came from we're immature seeds of light that was born from a very mature seed. It's like or soul. Yeah. It's like a tree. If you think about it, a giant oak tree can be held in the palm of your hand in an acorn, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, so think of it as the acorn is like what we are, more or less, to the tree. And yet, if we fall into the proper soil, nutrients, and sunlight, we grow into a mighty oak, and then we go to seed, and the process goes on and on and on and on. So it's an organic process, and like I said, the birthing of universes is completely organic. It's totally normal. But apparently you can have aberrations because we see this in nature.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yep.
Right? Parasitic behavior.
Sure.
And infections do occur. Excuse me.
Yeah.
So, anyway, this is what I've been learning, and It's not that I want to get away from it. It's, in fact, I just can't.
Right.
I cannot, in all good conscience, turn my back on this. And I've tried, I've really tried. I've struggled. No, because I wanted to live a quote-unquote normal life.
Yeah, I know.
But I feel like, Serena, you're being awfully quiet. What's going on?
She's gathering. She's probably taking notes right now, Robert, and get ready for the questions.
I'm listening.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I feel like sometimes I'm rambling here.
Oh, no.
No, your ramble is important because you're saying all the things that we are saying and that we need to hear. So I agree with you that I also wanted to get away from it and I couldn't. I tried, I did, and it didn't feel right. In fact, I think it's a crime against humanity to keep it secret or to keep this
or to ourselves.
Mm-hmm. We can't do it. We have to let people know. I'm tired of people suffering needlessly, and they are suffering needlessly because, as you say, it is an infection. So, but I would like for you to finish your thought. I mean, you tried to get away from it.
Well, yeah, that obviously didn't work. Look, I made enemies with them inadvertently back in 1985. And I was 24 years old. I was working as a security guard in Malibu at a beach. And there was a boy there at a house where I kept my surfboards next to where I was stationed as a security guard. And I had no idea at the time that he was possessed, but I did notice when I walked by him, it was a beautiful day, absolutely gorgeous day at the beach. And it was the fall equinox. I remember that clearly. It just coincided, or maybe that was part of the plan. Because as much as they manipulate and coordinate and do things to us, the flip side of all of this, the opposite side of this, is the beings of light, the children of God, the God race, the divine beings that we're related to. They care deeply about us. They're watching everything that's going on here, and they have a plan too, to rid the universe of this infection. Absolutely. I mean, why wouldn't they? So. Right.
So I have a question now, Robert. Now that you mentioned that, say you made enemies back then. How did you make enemies?
Well, it was totally inadvertent. Okay, I mean, so I met the boy. I kept my surfboard at this beach house. I knew the owners, and a lot of people there, they rent out the beach house for a week or something for vacations. So I didn't know who these people were that were there, but there was a young boy playing in the sand. I'm guessing maybe 10, 11 years old, and he looked very unhappy, even though it was a beautiful day. He's at the beach, and I noticed that, and then as I said, "Hi, how you doing?" And he didn't want to look at me, but I could see on his forehead there was a very large scar on his forehead, and I thought, "Whoa, that's not good." So, but I didn't want to engage him. I figured, he's just sitting there playing. No point in talking to him. And so I walked past him, and a couple doors over is where I was stationed on a public walkway. I mean, that was my job, basically, was to keep the public off of people's front yard, because you can't fence up the beach. So during the summertime, that was my seasonal job at the time. And so I was sitting there, maybe I don't know how many minutes after I had actually walked by the boy and talked to him briefly, just said hello. And then I heard the most, I'll never forget it. It was actually a very strange tone of, what it was he had gone upstairs to the second story of the house and ran full speed across the living room into a full-length sliding glass door that was not safety glass.
Oh, boy.
So he literally broke this giant pane of glass with his face. And it was so strange because it happened so quickly, and yet everything kind of slowed down for me as it was happening, because I heard this noise and my head just wrenched around towards that noise. Because not only was it loud, it was just so bizarre. I mean, it caught all of my attention. As I'm turning my head, I literally see the boy as he is, his hands reaching for his face, the glass is coming down, and then I saw the shadow of a man, a full-grown man, come up quickly behind him and snatch the boy up as the glass was still falling. This was so strange. And the next thing I know, everything went back to its normal speed, and I just started running. It was an instinct. Yeah. I figured that boy was in trouble. Mm-hmm. And so I ran to the house. This was not part of my job, but I ran to the house. I opened the door, and I was yelling, "Security, security." Excuse me. I said, all these years later, it's still emotional for me to talk about this because it was a life or death kind of thing. Mm-hmm. I ran upstairs. The grandmother was standing there. She was white as a sheet, and she was standing there like a statue. And I said to her, "Has anybody called the paramedics?" And she didn't answer. So I just looked around. I found the phone. I called them, and I said, "We have an emergency. Need an ambulance here right now." And apparently it was the grandfather that had swept the boy up. And he took him to a bedroom in the back and was holding a towel on his face, which was extremely lacerated. I mean, it was, he was going to bleed to death. Okay, wow. The grandfather's intentions were good, but I'm sorry, the boy was going to bleed out. And so if I hadn't called the paramedics, I think he would have died in the house. Huh. And as I'm looking at this in retrospect. At the time, it was just, like I said, just running on instinct and adrenaline. And after I called the paramedics, I said to the grandmother again, I said, "Do you know is there something I can clean up the glass with?" And she was still very much unresponsive. So I just looked around. I found some stuff, and I started cleaning up the glass because that was a hazard. There was glass everywhere and blood. And as I was doing that, she started to kind of snap out of it a little bit. And I was talking to her, and that's when I learned that, a year previous, that he'd actually hit his head while playing with the cat. The cat jumped out of the I guess he was in his father's pickup truck in the back. And then the cat, this is what she tells me, the cat jumped out. The boy jumped out of the bed after the cat and hit his face on the trailer hitch. And I'm thinking, now, I visualized this, and I'm thinking, so he jumped head first out of the back of the truck. And then, that seemed weird to me. But I could see it real clear in my mind, and because I was in such a heightened state of awareness right then. And then the grandmother drops this on me. She says, "I'm really glad the door was shut." I said, "What?"
Oh, boy.
And she says, "Yeah, he just got up and ran across the room as fast as he could." She says, "I think he was going to jump over the railing."
Oh, my God.
And I thought, that's what I thought. I thought, okay, I realized at that moment, and I don't know where this knowledge came from, but I said, I knew that the boy was hearing voices that were telling him he could fly.
Yeah.
But it was ending up, obviously he doesn't fly. What was happening was not only was he getting hurt, but his family was being traumatized.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay, which goes back to what you were saying, Ari, about people around us, how they can have a very negative influence on whether they mean it or not. Obviously, the boy didn't want it. He doesn't want to traumatize his family, but that was the end result. So as I'm standing there, having this awareness, suddenly, and I don't know how this happened, but I could actually sense that I know what it was, because they were really pissed at me for breaking up their party. That's where I made the enemy. Because there was more than one of them. And it was really weird because in my mind's eye, I could actually see these things. They look like ticks.
Wow.
To me, because that was the only analogy I could draw, because I'm growing up in Malibu. It's a problem. Ticks are a real problem because it's a mountainous area, and even though there's nice beaches, it's mostly mountains. And it's full of ticks.
Yeah.
So they get in the dog, they bite, they'll bite you. And it seems absolutely bizarre to me, but the moment I recognized them, I had really crossed the line. I wasn't just breaking up the party, their feeding frenzy. Now they're like, uh-oh, he can see us.
Yeah.
And so they just went nuts on me. They were attacking, literally, I could feel it in my solar plexus.
Oh, there you go.
In a way that, it was I've never felt anything like that before. It was like, if you can...
Yeah.
You can visualize a sink where you've got water in there and you pull the plug.
Yeah.
It was like that.
Exactly.
It wasn't draining into me. They somehow I pulled the plug and were draining energy out of me through my solar plexus.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, viciously too. I mean, it wasn't like, oh, this is not good. I thought, oh, damn, they're going to try and kill me.
Yeah.
Whatever these things are, they are so pissed off at me. They want to kill me. So, that was. Look, I know they've obviously been here for thousands of years, but they don't belong here, and they really have no right to do this, and so it's not like I had a choice. I swear, I told a lot of people this, but I'm telling you again, I have to explain it. It was like being thrown in the deep end of the pool, and just saying, okay, good luck. You're going to either sink or swim.
Yeah.
And so I was desperately trying to swim and looking for a flotation device because, this wasn't a theoretical event, okay? It was absolutely real. I couldn't explain it. It's still difficult for me to explain.
Yeah.
But after all these years, I've done a lot of research and I've met a lot of people. And, look, it didn't end there for me. Believe me. They didn't just give up. But what happened was I ended up going up on a mountain top and meditating that night because I didn't know what else to do. And, I was desperate. So, I was praying like my life depended on it. Mm-hmm. And the interesting thing was I was using a technique that I'd heard or learned. It's like I knew about meditation, but it's not like I practiced a lot. Look, I was 24. I was a young man, liked to surf, ride motorcycles, girls, that was my life, more or less. But I did have a very strong metaphysical background because my father was a minister. And he spent a lot of time with Paramahansa Yogananda. He was actually an ordained minister in that group. So I knew about Kriya Yoga, and but there was no point. It's not like I needed it. And suddenly I found myself needing it. So I sat there on the mountain between the full moon and the sun, and as it was setting, and I started praying, but in a very unusual way. I think it really had something to do with it. Something about the interplay of the light between the moon and the sun, and the fact that I started to, as I was sitting there in lotus position on the ground, I was literally using that to help boost my signal. And I also started to say Om as I was meditating. I was practicing not just saying Om, but I was actually pushing my tongue against the roof of my mouth and stimulating my third eye. Again, this was really reflexive. It was all instinctual. I was just running. I think I was having some sort of guidance. But look, I didn't plan this out.
Yeah.
I just had to do whatever I could to under those circumstances. So what I found was, the longer I meditated like that, and it really was very unusual, that I could actually hear like overtones, and I could feel the energy starting to flow through my spine and out the top of my head. And I figured, okay, that'll be my beacon. That'll be my signal. Mm-hmm. And on that signal, the only thought that I had was love. In a very, in a very unconditional way.
Yeah.
And very neutral. There wasn't like, I love whatever, ice cream or something. It wasn't like that. It was, I figured if there's anybody out there, that might be a good, I'd seen something, as far as I was concerned, that was a complete opposite of love. That truly was evil.
Exactly.
Those entities were evil. I was aware enough to know that was evil. So I was thinking, okay, what's the opposite? Love. Okay, love. That's keep it simple. And sort of like a message in a bottle. So I was tossing it out there, and after quite a few hours of being there, I got tired. And it was too late for me to go back. At that point, I mean, really, it was so late. I just needed to lay down and rest. I thought I was just going to rest for a little while, then ride my motorcycle back down to civilization and, you know, start my day. What happened, though, was I ended up laying down on the ruins of an old radar installation near Point Magoo, and on top of the mountain there, and I lay down on this cement slab that had like pillars around. It was kind of weird. It's sort of like modern ancient ruins sort of blended together, and I'm laying there, and I mean, literally, I only just started to lay down and relax when I found myself floating out of my body into light, which was very, very comforting. And strange too, because considering I was laying on cement, it was physically and emotionally, it was really very comforting. And then I realized, wow, those things can't follow me here. I don't know how I knew that, but I just knew that I was safe at that moment. So in some regards, you know, mission accomplished. And I don't think I was there very long. It felt like just moments later I saw something come towards me, which again put me on high alert, because I didn't know what it was. So that's a natural reaction, and as I'm watching this thing come closer, I realized it was a man, but it was the strangest man I've ever seen, because he was glowing. He was glowing brighter than the light that we were in. And to this day, I mean, I still remember it was so vivid. I just don't think it could be a dream. In fact, I'm sure it wasn't a dream. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. You could say it was a vision or whatever. But this person, I guess I've also found people have actually seen this guy too. It's not like I'm the only one. So anyway, he was wearing a robe and long hair and a beard. I don't know what color his skin was because he was glowing so brightly I couldn't even see it. And it doesn't matter. I do remember one thing, though, that was so bizarre, and I actually found somebody from Italy did a drawing of this guy. He must have met the same person or someone similar, same type of divine being. Uh-huh. But his eyes were glowing. There was light coming out of his eyes. You know, I could see his eyes, but it was so weird because normally, you know, you don't see light. You see light reflected on if you're close to a person, you can see, right? Yeah. No. There was light coming out of his eyes, mm-hmm. and I'm looking at this guy, and I said to myself, wow, who is that? Wow. And he says to me, I'm your father. What? Excuse me? No, that can't be. You know, I mean, that was the furthest thing from my mind. When he said that, I thought, you got to be kidding. I mean, I know what my dad looks like. It just it really was not what I was expecting, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. at all. That completely threw me for a loop. And the next thing I know, he was laughing. I guess he thought, and I'm just guessing, but I mean, you think about it. Here I am praying my heart out, mm-hmm. for assistance. The assistance comes, and then he's like, wait, what, you don't remember me? You know, I mean, so I guess it was funny to him. It wasn't funny to me at all, because the very next thing I knew, I was sitting bolt upright. I just snapped back into my body, and I really thought I was just having some kind of weird vision. I knew I wasn't asleep. That's the other thing, because typically you have to be really relaxed and sleeping for about an hour before you start having the REM. Yeah, the dreams. Where you could typically, that's normal, right? This was anything but normal. I really was only laying there for a few minutes, and I felt like I was only in the light for a very short time, and yet when I sat up, hours had gone by, and I only knew that by the position of the moon. Wow. So I thought, no, wait a minute, man, something else happened here, but why can't I remember? I mean, I got up and started walking around in circles, talking to myself, going, what is going on here? Who was that? Where was I? What in the heck is going on here? So at that point, it was probably an hour before sunrise. I figured, well, I saw the moon rise and sunset. I'm going to watch. I'm going to sit here. I'm going to wait. I'm going to greet the sun. This one, I'm going to watch. I mean, you think about it, this is kind of an unusual thing to do. I've never done it before or since. I mean, and it's, here I am sitting on a mountain watching the heavens move around me, and yet they were moving me into a completely new direction. Not that my life was, I think it's all one continuous path. I shouldn't try and separate it, but I mean, there's turning points in a person's life.
Yeah.
Where it's like, hey, you're never going to be the same after this. So, not that I was anything, I don't think my life was ever really meant to be quote unquote normal. When I look at it, but that was truly a transformation or a turning point for me.
Wow.
But it gets weirder, and I know I've told this to a lot of people, but you got to bear with me for a minute here. What happens? I after sunrise, I felt okay. It's time for me to go back. So I went back to work. I didn't even go home. For some reason, I just went back to work and was sitting there trying to kind of reflect on what was going on, trying to make sense of it. And I felt compelled to go back to the house where the boy was, because I didn't know if he actually lived or not.
Wow.
See, so I went back over there.
Wow.
And I knocked on the door, and nobody answered again. So I opened the door. I said, excuse me, security again. I walk in there, and the grandparents are standing at the top of the stairs on the second story. And I looked up and I said, hi, look, I'm sorry to bother you. Is your grandson okay? And they said, yeah, he lost a lot of blood, and he required over 300 stitches, but he's gonna pull through. And I'm like, wow, okay. I said, this is gonna sound strange, but you can heal the scars on his face, but unless you do something to heal the scars on his soul, this is gonna happen again. And then I turn around. And I walked out of there, and I thought, okay, I'm going to get fired. This is the end of my job, because that's not something you do.
Right.
It was well said.
Yeah.
It was well said.
And guided.
Because
you were
absolutely,
yeah.
Very good observation. Yeah. I'm sure I was, because I think back on what it must have been like. What I felt like when I was in the light was like, okay, this is good. In fact, it's all good. I don't want to go back to that. I don't really want to go back, Don't send me back.
Right.
And then I thought about the boy.
Mm-hmm.
Was that fair?
Right.
Should I just say, hey,
yeah.
tough luck, buddy.
Yeah, exactly.
Sorry.
Right.
Sorry you're being attacked. I'm safe. Good luck.
Right.
But no, I quite sure. And I have no direct memory of it, but I have this really strong feeling that one of the things I said to this radiant being was, could you help that boy? And he said to me, it's weird because I don't have a clear memory. It's just this weird, really deep feeling that's somewhere inside me that he said to me, no, you fix it. Exactly. I'm like, what?
Right.
Wow.
I can't do that. And he says, let me show you. You can do this. I'm like, okay. So I do have this vague, feels more like a dream, where somehow we were there in the room with the boy, and I think we were speaking to him on a soul level.
Of course.
And that's how I could see the scars. And that's why I had to give the message the next day.
Wow.
Because he's part of that family, right? And they were all being scarred by it. So he probably, as a child, would not have understood, although I think we spoke to him on a soul level, and it probably didn't have quite an impact on him in a way that he could not articulate consciously. Like I said, there was a lot of stuff that happened that when I was out of my body that I can't remember, and I feel like they blocked my memory on purpose, because we live this is a war zone.
Yep.
This matrix is so highly manipulative that if I had suddenly come back with too much information, it would have been dangerous for me.
Of course.
Okay, I could have got locked up or whacked or whatever. I don't really know what would have happened, but I think they're very strategic in the way they do things. So however, they didn't want me to go completely off my rocker because it was really very disturbing. I mean, I was happy to meet this guy, but on some level, like I said, there was just like a blank, and it's like, wait a minute, how can you be so ultra conscious of yourself and your surroundings in this light, and the next thing you know, it's all gone? It's like, wait a minute, what did I miss? Why can't I know? So I'm like I said, I see the goat boy's grandparents, and on some level I felt relieved. I figured, you know what, if they fire me, I don't even care. This is just a dumb job. You know, we're that poor kid, you know, it's like his family. This is pure evil. What's going on here? And so I walk back over, and I'm sitting there, and I just really perplexed. And this girl comes up. She is a friend of my girlfriend at the time, and she says to me, really excited, she says, "Oh, hey, Robert, I saw you in my dream last night." I'm like, "Yeah, so?" And she says, you taught me how to fly." I'm like, "Okay." And she says, "Yeah, you took me up to the mountains." I said, "What?"
Oh my gosh.
I know, so I said, I'm like, I wasn't going to tell anybody about this, honestly, because I didn't know what was going on. How could I tell anybody, especially not somebody who knows my girlfriend? Like, oh, hey, your boyfriend's losing his mind. So, like I said, I didn't initiate this. She brought it up out of the blue. She says, "Yeah, you took me out of my room, and we flew up to the mountains," and she says, "and then you taught me how to fly." And I said, "I did?" And she's like, "Yeah." She said, "But I wasn't really getting it." You got to understand, too, this girl at the time, very materialistic. I mean, really didn't. Her whole thing was going shopping at the mall, smoking cigarettes, driving, cool cars, whatever. That was her whole thing. And so she says, "Yeah, you were." At one point, she says, "You got mad at me because I wasn't really getting it." And she said, "So you put me in a shopping cart and started pushing me down the mountain." And she said that really kind of pissed me off. She says, so I jumped out of the shopping cart, and then I started flying on my own. She said that was really great. She says, "I think it has something to do with spirituality." She says, I read something about that in my psych class once, and I'm looking at her going, wow, I was dumbfounded. And she says, "And then you followed me all the way back to my house and made sure I got into my bedroom, and then you left." I was like, "I did, huh? Okay."
Wow.
I didn't, that's what I was thinking. I was thinking, wow, okay, damn, what else did I do that night? I was trying, like I said, I knew there was a lot that happened in those hours of time, but it was being blocked. And yet, here was this saving grace, somebody witnessing to me that, okay, you're not really going crazy, you're just stepping into another level of reality here. And when I went home, phase 2, just this was the clincher. When I walked in my apartment, the phone was ringing. It was my grandmother. Now, she's a complete opposite in many regards of this young lady I was telling you about. My grandmother was a very spiritual person. She had every reason to be, because she had her back broken as a young girl.
Oh, wow.
Accidentally, and a tree fell on her. It had been partially cut and left by the workers, and a breeze came along and it fell over and it crushed her spine.
Oh my goodness!
It was a miracle that she ever was able to walk, let alone have children. 3 girls.
Wow.
Okay. Sorry, I miss her.
I don't blame you.
She loved Christ. She said Christ was the one that healed her. I'm like, okay, whatever. How do you argue with that?
Right.
There was a lot of painful surgeries involved too, by the way, as a child.
Yeah.
Some were highly experimental. But here's the point. She says to me, "Robbie, I saw you at the foot of my bed last night." I'm thinking, uh-oh. Now what? I hope I didn't take my grandmother flying, That would have been, But, so she says to me, she says, "Yeah." And she says, "You were saying something to me, and I can't remember, for the life of me, I can't remember what it was." She says, "Because you were all lit up like a Christmas tree."
Oh, God. Wow.
She said it was the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen. And I'm like, oh my God, Granny, I gotta go. because I couldn't tell her. I couldn't tell her what was going on.
Yeah.
I didn't even know what was happening. I mean, like I said, it was wonderful to give me confirmation, but I was still confused. I mean, honestly, it's taken me decades to actually have some clarity on this. And the clarity really didn't come until I mentally asked that being of light to help me get clear.
Yeah.
You know, and that's when a lot of the pieces just started to fall into place. One step at a time, okay? Because this thing is very convoluted and difficult to comprehend, and a little bit, sometimes a lot dangerous too.
Sure.
So it was a natural progression. So that's how come I was able to see certain things that other people might have missed, and then of course I've been reporting it heavily. I mean, internationally since the fall of 2011 is when I first stepped out there and started. So you can imagine, though, along the way that, like I said, these entities really don't like me, and it's okay. It's not like I hate them, by the way. I actually have sympathy for their situation, but I also know that it's incumbent upon them to change. You can't really force them into it. If they want to change, fine, but at some point they either get with the program here or leave.
Right. Yeah.
They're not welcome here. Not in the current form. They're not welcome here.
Yeah.
At all.
I have a question, Robert.
Go ahead. Yes.
When you asked this being of light if he could help the boy, and he said, no, you fix it. How do you understand that now? What do you think that was about?
It was an opportunity. It was an opportunity for me. I think we all choose our path, and I do recall one of the feelings I had was, look, I need to go back and assist the boy, and with the knowledge that I will return to the light. Sooner or later, that's home. That's where I'm going to return to. That's where I came here from. And so that was a very important lesson. It's sort of like, I have a teenage son, so I have to use him as an example. I can't do everything for him. And in fact, it would be wrong for me to try. At some point, you have to show him how to, cook some food and clean your clothes, and you know what I'm saying? It's like he has to learn how to do things for himself so he can be independent. And I believe that was what this individual, literally like father to son, he was using that opportunity to teach me how to do this. So
but how could you help the boy? I mean, how could you, because the way that you were asking for him to help that boy was, I imagine, on a soul level, because the boy was just going to keep going through this experience with the interference he was having. And I imagine that's what your prayer was to this father figure, to help him with that. So, but he said, no, you fix it. How could you do that?
Yeah, actually, at that point, it wasn't a prayer. I may have confused things. I believe I was still in the light with him. And like I said, much of our conversation and the information that he passed on to me, they blocked my conscious memory of it. But I do have this feeling that, like I said, that I let's put it this way. If I could just do it all over again, that would have been what I would have asked him. Not for myself, but I would have, because I didn't feel like I was being preyed upon. Yes, they started attacking me, but obviously I figured a way out. I figured a way to get away from them.
Yeah.
Yet that boy was in a position where he and his family, they were just going to be tormented by those creatures. So that would have been, if I could do it all, like I said, consciously, that would have been my desire. My intent would have been to say, hey, could you help that boy and his family? Figuring, hey, you came here to help me, but you know what? I feel okay. Can you help him? He almost bled to death in front of his grandparents. I mean, Jesus. But like I said, I think he said to me, no, you do it. It's like, what? Again, I can only, I can't say this with, I'm not positive that's what happened, but I have a feeling. I have a very strong feeling. So I wasn't praying to him. I was literally asking him face to face, would you please help this kid? And he said, no, you do it. So, and I must have on some level, because about a year later, I was getting my surfboard from the house there, in the storage, and out of nowhere, the boy's father came around the corner. And I mean, it seemed like nowhere for me. I didn't see him. Okay, so he just suddenly came around the corner as I was walking, and it was a very tall man, and he reached out with just real strength. I mean, he grabbed my hand and it just gripped it, and he says to me, I didn't even know who he was. He goes, I just want to thank you for what you did for my son. Wow. I'm like, okay, and then that was it. That was it.
Wow.
And then he just turned around and walked away. I'm like, what? What the heck right, that guy. I mean, it started, see, this is the thing, I can't get away from it, even if I wanted to. These things just keep popping up. Mm-hmm. So, and I know I'm not alone in that regard. I found that out as I started going public with this as a fact. For a long time I wanted to write about this as fiction because I figured nobody would believe me. And honestly, well, look, I wouldn't believe if somebody told me a cockamamie story like that. I'd be very skeptical. I
know, the same with me, and the same with Ari.
Yeah. Well, see, but this is the other thing that's actually strengthening us, is to share these stories, find our common ground, and then stand together.
Absolutely.
Against this problem, these parasites. And that's what they really don't want, by the way.
Right.
So, in some regard, we are, we are doing the work.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm pretty sure a lot of us volunteered to come here and do this. It's I mean, seriously, not fun on any level, but somebody has to do. Somebody has to do it.
Yeah.
Somebody had to come, like they say, boots on the ground.
Yeah.
There had to, of course, there's a whole support system behind us, of these beings of light, these divine beings, we are the God race is like I said, we are all in a state of becoming gods of if we so choose, gods of our own universe, creators of an entire universe full of life that we created, but not manipulate. Okay, it's free will. It's like you set the process in motion. You bloom. Literally, your soul blooms into a universe full of life and light. But so you don't manipulate it. They're not robotic, but you become responsible for your creation, right? Mm-hmm. You are responsible. I'm sorry. To be clear, you are responsible for your creations. And so you look after them. You have to. They're yours, And again, that's one of the reasons I feel very strongly that these creatures didn't come from this universe. The God of this universe, my understanding of the God of this universe is that it would never create something. It's so, unless God is a psychopath, really? I mean, you think it through. Most people never even think of this through. It's like, God created the devil and demons? Why?
Right.
To teach us a lesson? Because we're sinners? I mean,
just
this is insanity.
Robert, I was just going to ask you that. What do you think about all of those people that say this boy's experience and all of that, these are lessons? He contracted all of this before he came in. He wanted to break his faith. He wanted to have confusion. And in our case, other beings who have experiences with these, archons and being attacked, oftentimes our brains can't think. We have brain fog. We have emotional fog. We're not thinking clearly. We can't think straight, right? And so all we know is this confusing thing that's happening. We can't sit back and say, oh, I'm in school, I'm having a lesson, this is the lesson, okay, I'm gonna get an A+ on this, and I'm gonna be objective in this. No, you don't do that. You're experiencing things, and I think a lot of the times there is deliberate brain fog or memories deliberately erased so that you don't know what's going on. And to me, this is diabolical, and this is definitely not of God. I mean, there are people who insist that we contracted every single thing that happens in our lives, and this is because we just want to have lessons. I mean, it's insanity. That's...
Well, it's like, okay, look, we know that if you break a bone, it will heal stronger. So does that mean you should just break all your bones so you can be stronger? I mean, it's
Thank you.
At some point, it makes no sense. It's totally illogical.
I know.
I love your analogy.
But wait a minute. But on a higher level, Robert, on a higher level, you would want to do this from a higher perspective. You do what you have to do to learn what the freak is the lesson when all of your bones are broken and you spend a lifetime healing them? I mean,
or in agony, or
these things get in the way of living the important lessons of the divine being. They get in the way of life and joy. They get in the way of sharing and compassion. They get in the way of people helping people because they're so bogged down with their own pain. They can't do anything but emit that and cause havoc in their circles, and then those circles don't know what's going on, and it goes on and on and on. And to me, this is sabotage, not lessons.
Yeah.
Right, and you're right. In my opinion, I would say that's true. And like I said, it's taking decades to have any clarity on this. And honestly, as the information came to me, I was shocked. Repeatedly, I kept thinking, oh, okay, now I could see it. And then I'm like, no, here's another piece of the puzzle. Mm-hmm. Now look at it again. And every time that happened, I go, wow, okay.
Can you give us an example? Can you give us an example of one of those pieces of the puzzle?
Yeah, one of the books that was given to me early on after that experience was, at the time, it was called Sunburst, Return of the Ancients. It was written by a friend of my father, my biological father. His name was Norman Paulson. He started a group called Sunburst in Santa Barbara. And he knew my father because of Paramahansa Yogananda. They were both going there to the Self-Realization Fellowship.
Right.
They were members. My father became a minister, and Norman went off to pursue other things, but he always had a deep connection. So one of the things that Norman had written about through his contact with benevolent, divine human beings was that the beginning of the fall, as he described it, as I told you before, at some point in the past, our spacefaring ancestors literally went somewhere outside of this universe or this dimension, and when they came back, they were possessed. And what Norman didn't know is what we're discussing now, that there was literally these other dimensional entities that attached themselves to these divine beings. And at that point, those divine beings who were possessed started a rampage of destruction throughout, everywhere they went. And there really was no defense mechanism against these things. Sort of like, your body's attacked. If you don't have, if your immune system has never been exposed to certain things, you have no immunity, so you're very vulnerable. And that's really what happened here throughout the different galaxies. When these beings came in, there's no defense. So they just came in and started slaughtering whole planetary systems. And the Lyra system didn't. Depending on who you talk to, it was a giant war. But the truth is, it was a one-sided deal. It was these people who had literally gone insane, started killing, rampaging, and destroying God's creation. And they did that to this solar system as well. That's why there's the asteroid belt. That was a planet just beyond Mars that was completely annihilated. Mars itself was wrecked. Our Earth was devastated. They stopped short of turning it into a desert like Mars or blowing it up because they saw that there was a lot of resources they could exploit here, including our DNA. So when they showed up here...
You're seeing an entire progression and pattern of destruction and obviously recognizing that that's not part of the divine plan. Because not part of God's. No, of course not.
No, because God is a creator.
What did you mean with the Lyrans? Did you just mention Lyrans?
Yes, supposedly, depending on which source you're talking about, that there was a war there, and they annihilated their entire solar system. They nuked the solar system. They blew up the star, and it's just a big ball of gas now. But it was a beautiful solar system. So it was just a terrible waste of life and resources. So who did
this? The Lyrans did it, or somebody did it to the Lyrans?
No, excuse me. This is a little misleading by naming them as somehow they're not human. You got to understand that these were humans attacking their fellow man.
Right.
The humans that were possessed came back into this universe and started attacking their own kind.
Yes.
So that is just one example. That was one location that we can identify using the name Lyra. It means nothing really. It's just the pictures of it are interesting. They call it the Eye of God because it's like just a big gas ball now that kind of looks like a big eyeball. But in fact, it really was the entire solar system that was nuked. Just like our solar system was completely devastated when these warriors, not warriors, they were just insane demoniacs.
Demoniacs.
They came here, they wrecked the solar system, and here's the other thing, you really, I'm trying to paint a picture here mentally. The Earth and the Moon were very much perfected by the divine ones, the godlike beings, as being in service to the Creator. They enhanced life here. I mean, they made it a perfect garden or a paradise. A paradise literally means a walled garden, and there used to be a shield around this planet that was transparent. You could transfer through it if you knew what you were doing, but it was like 20 feet thick, and it only allowed the beneficial rays of light to come into the planet inside the atmosphere, which, like I said, which was essentially sealed off. So this is one of the reasons everything was gigantic. People lived incredibly, relatively speaking, they were very tall, they lived long lives, they were all telepathic, empathic. I mean, they were divine beings until the demoniacs showed up, destroyed. They wrecked this planet. They took down the shield. They killed millions of people. Some of them fled and survived, but essentially they turned this from a paradise planet to a parasite planet, which is totally unsustainable. And they corrupted everything, including our DNA, and they turned us into a slave species. Those of us that are the DNA or whoever they could capture, they turned us into their property. And so it's also part of the problem here. One of the reasons that the governments really are not in a position to disclose this, because they're all essentially serving these demoniacs, the evil empire that has been established. The thing about it all is that it's totally unsustainable. Their whole way of living is parasitic. So at some point they're just going to kill everything, and yet the divine ones have been watching this and gradually building up resistance and immunity and repairing things along the way. So this is one of the reasons that we see this influx of these indigo children. That's the next wave. Because it's incremental. You can't just fix something like this overnight. But they swore when they were driven out of this world, the divine beings swore that they would return and liberate this world and actually reclaim it.
So do you think, Robert, that it's happening from the inside out, meaning it's really happening first for us to rise, those of us who probably came from, who knows, probably realms, different realms that have that maybe we have that DNA already, and all, like for example in your case, what I saw when you were describing your interaction with that being was probably you were being activated, and that's usually the way it works, and a lot of us have been activated, and that we are here to help this planet from the inside. We're the troops inside. So, is that what you feel, that's what's happening with the divine ones, that are we basically have to, rise to the occasion, being on the surface, and then maybe divine intercession will happen?
Yeah, it's not like either or. I mean, yes, divine intervention is happening all the time. As you said, we're part of that process. The fact that we can even have this conversation with any clarity at all is indicating to me that we are part of that, the reclamation. We're here liberators on some level. There's obviously beings on other dimensions. See, that's the other thing about a universe is existing in multiple dimensions. So not only are there infinite number of universes, there's multiple. When we say dimensions, I don't mean like top down, side. Let me just be specific here. I think you know, but I just have to clarify this.
Yeah.
We're talking about literally. We're talking about different frequencies, vibratory rates of our being. The soul itself is multi-leveled, but it's not like they're completely separate. Okay, as far as I know, there's 3 levels or particular frequencies to our soul, and this was made clear to me recently in a book I was reading called "The Bowl of Light" by Hank Wesselman. Yeah, it's about the Polynesian, the Kuna, teaching about these, and it actually has a section in there about these parasitic beings. By the way,
yeah,
it's very interesting. You might want to pick up a copy.
Absolutely.
But "The Bowl of Light," Hank Wesselman. Anyway, the thing is that consciousness is right now is by under one of the lies they told us. Oh yeah, the other thing was, I'm sorry, let me backtrack. When they came here and destroyed this world, the survivors that they enslaved, they told us it was our fault. That God is punishing us because we're sinners. God caused the flood and the destruction of mankind because we were imperfect. We're sinners, right? Well, wait a second, God, you created us in your image, so you're imperfect too. Then, I mean, see, none of this makes sense if you follow the logic. It doesn't add up. It's 2 and 2 is 5 with them. But that's all they know how to do is lie. And okay, so here's the other thing. Modern science is trying to tell us that that there is no real divine plan or design in all of this. In other words, intelligence or consciousness doesn't play a role. It sort of just magically manifests if the right chemicals are involved. And that's 100% backwards. Consciousness is primary, and it can take 3-phase states of either pure consciousness, which is the highest vibratory rate, energy, which is a slightly lower but not lesser vibratory rate, and then there's matter, which is the lowest vibratory form of consciousness. But it's all consciousness.
Sure.
Okay, and these you can say that they're come in digits. A digit could be because it is constantly being processed on some level. It's not like a computer, but it has to be accounted for on some level. In other words, there's a learning process going on here. So there's a memory, and there's an awareness, and everything is being examined and learned. So it's an evolutionary process. But you say consciousness being primary, there's multiple levels to each universe, depending on a person's consciousness and their evolutionary state as far as being a seed of light or a soul. So the soul itself, like I said, has multiple levels of self, being pure consciousness, energy, and matter. Matter being the physical body. And, the physical body doesn't take shape by itself. I mean, it's like you could take a bucket of atoms, molecules, they're never going to arrange into the shape of a living thing, right?
Right.
It's the blueprint, it's the energy / consciousness that directs the matter to take the form and function. Mm-hmm. So there's actually intelligence or consciousness in everything at all times. It's just various levels. So one of the things I found out was fascinating is that there's multiple Earths.
Right.
And they are connected through these portals. So there is an Earth that is still relatively perfect. Mm-hmm. And I found that out quite. Okay, nothing's by accident, but I was guided to find. It turned out it was a friend of mine. One of the I do a lot of radio, so I was on big show, and afterwards this person contacted me and asked me some really weird question about, do you know what's going on in the South Pacific with these in the military? I'm like, no. Well, can you find out? I'm like, I don't. All right, fine. Sure, I'll do what I can. I thought it was kind of a kooky thing to ask, but it turned out because this person was very insistent. She asked me like on the third time, okay, yeah, I'll ask somebody and see what I find out. So I asked a friend of mine who used to be in the Navy, hey, do you know anything about this? And he goes, oh, no, I don't know about that, but let me tell you what happened to me. And that story's just going to come out coming out of New Dawn magazine in Australia. It'll be the first time that story's ever been told publicly.
Wow.
But it happened in 1970. Yeah, it happened in 1975. Anyway, he was flying test flying a jet for the Navy, and he literally entered a green fog.
Yeah.
And lost engines and radio, and ended up making an emergency landing on an island that wasn't even on a map. He was there for 6 months until the islanders said, you know what, you really need to go home now. He's like, what do you mean now? What? I've been asking. I told you from day one I needed to go home. And they're like, no, you really need to go home now. I was like, okay. So they took him in their little canoes or boats or whatever. He had his raft and everything. They left him out there a couple miles out beyond the reef, and then he says he's sitting there in the raft, and the whole entire island disappeared in a flash of white light.
Wow. Like
and
a movie.
That's what he's like, what the heck is that all about? I mean, so, and then his radio worked, and he was able to establish contact. He was picked up, and then he was taken back to Pearl Harbor, where they grilled him for 3 weeks straight. Because he'd been gone for 6. Turns out there was a story just like this recently. January of this year, it came out. A Coast Guardsman went missing for 3 months off Oahu. They spent weeks looking for this guy. They couldn't find him. They declared him dead. And then one day he just magically shows up. They said he was incoherent. Took him to a hospital. And then he talks to his commanding officer, and then they transfer him over to Pearl Harbor. So this has been going on for a while. I'm sort of giving you the thumbnail sketch on this because it's a very complicated story. But here's the thing. People go missing all the time. I don't think they're all abducted. I think some of them literally end up on other worlds. And that could be the part of the plan here. If things cannot be rectified here and now on this world, it may be that the divine beings may literally just move a good portion of humanity off to another world or another version of this world that is uncontaminated by these parasitic entities. So it's like I said, the truth, it really is stranger than fiction. And a lot of times, I know it sounds, especially if somebody was coming at this with no background whatsoever in metaphysics or spirituality, to be like, oh, that guy's crazy. I mean, he's just rambling. But like I said, this has taken. I'm speaking from experience, not only my experience, but for I found part of my work is to interview people, and not for my own personal sake either. By the way, it's here's my agreement. Nothing will be hidden from me as long as I hide nothing from anyone else.
You got it.
Because the universe, that's how the universe operates. Like I said, if it's all consciousness, it by its very nature, it wants to share information with itself, or the many iterations of itself. Like I said, because we're all fractals of the same hologram. So as we grow, it grows. And so by assisting that process, it's assisting me.
Yeah.
So that's the agreement. I don't know how else to explain it. Because people say, where do you get all this stuff? I'm like, hey, look, it's not like I have a monopoly on weird information.
Right.
It's not mine. I'm open to it.
Yeah.
And I do think it's part of the agreement that whatever it was. I mean, I can't prove this, but it feels like when I look back on the arc of my life, it is so unusual that yes, I could have agreed to it, but it does seem like that there are higher powers involved in things that, I don't know how else to say it, because I don't see anything as just accident. I really don't. It's all synchronicity. And that was something that Celestine Prophecy, the first book, I thought was fantastic in that regard. Really helped people. As I said, the first book I read after really coming to some awareness or trying to figure it out, a friend gave me a copy of Sunburst, Return of the Ancients, but now it was rewritten. The new version is called Christ Consciousness by Norman Paulson. Fascinating read in there. It's not just about his life, it also gives you a timeline. He and his wife or at least the woman he was married to prior to his passing, he and she spent a lot of time trying to piece together what really happened historically on this planet.
Mm-hmm.
Between the good guys and the bad guys. And the only component they were really missing was why did certain portion of humanity go crazy? I mean, he did say, based on his context, they told him that some of them had ventured into this area. They literally went into some place where they weren't supposed to go, and they came out and they were insane. See, what I know now, that they were possessed, and that's part of the puzzle that I'm able to share with people. And I think we really need to know it. It was, and part of the thing, my awareness was that had really come full circle when, as I was writing my second book about Washington, D.C., and all the alien activity that goes on there covertly.
Yeah.
I came across what I told you. It's the thing about the boy.
Yeah.
That later became the story that we know as The Exorcist.
Right.
And then I found more examples of like there's a demon cat living in the Capitol, but nobody seems to care. I'm like, why wouldn't you care about this? I mean, they even tell people on the public tours, and here's footprints left by the demon cat in the marble wall. I'm like, what?
Wow.
How could you not care that this thing only shows up prior to national crises? I mean, obviously, it's living there, and it's probably not alone.
Can you talk a little bit more about that information in reference to what's going on in Washington, D.C. as much as you can?
Yeah, I mean, and this really irritates me, but for some reason, I ended up being the leading expert on alien covert activity in Washington, D.C. And I didn't ask for this, much like, I mean...
That doesn't surprise me.
I don't remember signing up for that, but whatever. I found, again, over the years, it started in 2005. In the spring of 2005, I was forwarded an email by a friend of mine.
Wait, Robert, if I hold that thought,
go ahead.
You forwarded an email by a friend of yours. Hold that thought. I just want to say something really quickly.
Yes.
Ari and I, in our last talk, we had a discussion about the jinn, specifically the jinn, D-J-I-N-N, and I'm starting personally to have suspicions that they are the ones who are running the White House, along with aliens or ET races and other things, because there is a slew or a combination of species, in my opinion, of all of the interactions of the invisible forces that are manipulating humanity, okay?
Right.
So I have a feeling that the jinn is one of the prominent forces, and the moment that I said that in our Skype conversation, the power to my house surged, my computer died, and it went off. Now, the interesting thing is I was listening to, a week before, Miles Johnston speaking about the jinn as well, because he was interviewing Rosemary Guiley. And he was explaining to her that when he was interviewing somebody else, speaking about the jinn, as soon as he mentioned the jinn being in control of our leadership, their Skype connection went dead as well. And it was interesting because when I said it with Ari, my computer died. I just had a power surge, and we were having clear blue skies, no weather, no winds, nothing.
Yeah.
And so this is what had happened, and I just wanted to express that because I have my suspicions there. But anyway, please continue with your story.
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, look, they're called different names by different people, but it's the same entities, group of entities that start with these non-physical parasitic entities or beings that, well, they're not beings, they're just creatures.
Yeah.
They're not fully formed in that regard. I mean, they're not humanoid, but they prey on humanoid life forms. The more complex, they're very simple, but they, and all they really need is energy.
Yeah.
But they can't get the energy they need. It doesn't exist here naturally. They have to manipulate us in a way that will generate that negative energy for them. Mm-hmm. And so that's how they survive while they're here. So yes, of course they're in Washington D.C. And I make that very clear in the first half of the conclusion of my second book. I know that may not make sense to people, but if you ever read my second book, Covert Encounters in Washington, D.C., I urge people to read the conclusion first, so that everything else that you read in there, the hundreds and hundreds of reports of aliens in Washington, D.C., will start to make sense. That the reason they're covert, the reason that the government won't talk about it, is because there's this collaborative effort. It's all covert, but it's all corrupt, and it's cruel. It's cruel and it's unsustainable. And so one of the things I found out, it's called a Potomac fever or Beltway fever, that the longer a person, an individual, has been working in Washington, D.C., their behavior changes. And you could say, I know most people would attribute it to being bought out by special interest groups. But it's not like that. I mean, Washington, D.C. itself was designed to literally serve the dark side. From day one. Yeah. And I give all the historical facts for that in the conclusion. It's not like I want this to be the case. Believe me, it's just that's what I found as I was trying to make sense of how in the world. I mean, think about this one. If you have in Washington D.C. the Washington Monument, the White House, and the Capitol, that's the heart of prohibited airspace. Yeah. Which is surrounded by restricted airspace. So how in the world have been things, how in the heck have these other dimensional things been able to get in and out of there since at least 1952 on a massive scale? Yeah. I've gotten over 900 cases in the second book. I think it's probably more like thousands of times, but the records are being, kept from the public. I mean, they really don't want. See, this is going back to what I said before. You
got thousands of what?
There's over 900 eyewitness accounts of alien activity covertly occurring in Washington, D.C. from 1850 to 2011 in that book. Okay. But this is an ongoing thing. This is an ongoing thing. There are reports still being posted on the internet and photographs and videos of these craft and or entities coming into controlled airspace at will.
Prohibited airspace, right? Okay.
Prohibited, restricted airspace. Actually, all airspace is controlled to some degree. Yeah. But those areas, especially, think about it. It was after 9/11 that it was July of 2002 that a professional photographer who used to work for ABC News was at the Capitol by the reflecting pool taking pictures of a local recording artist for an album cover when he caught pictures of UFOs swarming over the Capitol, which was identical to what had happened 50 years earlier in 1952. So when I received those pictures in July of 2005, I was very skeptical, thinking there's no way that could happen and, that it could be kept secret. And so I figured it was just a fake, but there was contact information for the photographer there. This email had been forwarded to me by a friend who used to work for the CIA and military intelligence, and he was asking me my opinion of it as just photographically. Does this look right? And I said, I can't tell. Really, it could be Photoshop. I don't know. So I called the photographer and we spoke, and we've been in touch now for over 7 years. He's featured in my first book, and his website is ufodc.com. But if you want to see my archive of historical timeline of UFO photographs and movies that have been kept from us because they were all confiscated in 1952, just go to unicusmagazine.com, click on books, and then it'll have a link to the photographic archive. It's free. Just check it out, because this is stuff they don't want us to see. And you'll also see the picture of the black helicopter that visited my home. Yeah, when I first published just an article about this with the photographs from July 16, 2002, I was visited by a black helicopter. Now, here's what happens. I'm sitting there in my studio, much like I'm doing now, but I was living in Los Angeles at the time. Very quiet residential neighborhood. I'm sitting there in my studio. Suddenly, I'm hearing this helicopter come into the neighborhood, and it starts doing circles over my house. Really very low. It was shaking the entire house. And so I come outside naturally to see what's going on, and they were literally hovering over my driveway. Really low, really low. I could have hit them with a rock. They were so low. Goodness. And completely black helicopter, blacked out windows. Really, you wouldn't know how loud that thing is unless you're standing there.
Who are those guys? Are those men in black? what they call men in black?
Well, that's a very misleading term, but yes, they'd like us to think they're just men in black. I'm sure it's a division of the government that doesn't exist, sort of like the NSA, no such agency, or the National Reconnaissance Organization.
Really? No such agency, really?
Well, that's the joke. That's the inside joke. They're listening in. They're listening in on this conversation.
Of course.
And the real reason they're listening in on everybody is because they've been following the activity ever since they got their mandate in 1952. That agency has been they've been following the activity of aliens living on this planet covertly. I know that sounds crazy, but there's a book. There's a book that was written by somebody that was involved in that project called Above Black. So you see, there's a lot of whistleblowers that have come out over the period of time about these various things, but they have been dismissed. Some have been hunted down.
Yeah.
It's like what's going on with Mr. Snowden right now.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's the real reason that the NSA was able to do things that were above the law, because they're dealing with something that is truly a national security in their minds, and but it's something they cannot disclose. They feel they really believe that if they were to do that everything will become unraveled. Based on what their advisors, the think tanks there in Washington D.C., what they came up with was that we can't tell the public, they couldn't handle it. But that's not true. What the problem is that the public would get really really steamed if they found out that there was these hostile, corrupt extraterrestrials that basically took over this planet and enslaved us thousands of years ago. Yeah, I think people would get really upset about that.
Oh, yeah.
And we'd be a handful. It's another reason that the aliens don't just when they're in D.C. why they don't hold a press conference. They don't want to explain themselves.
Of course not.
Think about it. Wait a second. Just logically again, let's walk through this. If you go to hostile territory, because first of all, the government says they don't exist, right? The ETs don't exist. Second of all, if they do exist, they're not a threat. So you can't have it both ways. But they're trying to tell us that these things, and yet the UFOs keep showing up in Washington D.C.
Yeah.
They're seen all over the world, but they're really, really attracted to Washington D.C. Now, why would you go as an intelligent species? Why would you go somewhere where people deny that you even exist, and you're not welcome? Why would you go there hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of times, unless you have an agenda?
Yeah.
Okay, that's what was puzzling me for years. The first book I kind of rushed through. I got it out in about a year, and I debuted it on Coast to Coast in 2006. And immediately, my website, the server where I had the pictures, was hacked. By a company in just outside Washington, in Herndon, Virginia. They went in to the server and they took the pictures down, and then they locked the server in such a way that the people who owned it could not even get in there and effect repairs. So I ended up having to move to a different web hosting service. But that was phase 2 of in-your-face intimidation.
Yeah.
Hey, you think you're smart? You think you can just report this and we're not going to do anything? And it's getting worse. You can see, when somebody killed Andrew Breitbart, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And I think this other guy, I forget his name, Richardson or something. No, it was the guy that was reporting on took down one of the generals. I forget his name. But anyway, there's another journalist that died in mysterious circumstances recently in Los Angeles. So these people don't take kindly to it. It's like the general public thinks they're just gathering information, and that's not true. They're not passive at all. They're highly active. They have a much larger budget than the CIA, and much like the CIA, they do covert ops. And and in my opinion, they're totally involved with the alien agenda, whether they know it or not, or care to know it, and I think some of them do wake up one morning and go, "Oh my God, I'm serving the dark side." But then what? You're so compromised, and everybody in Washington D.C. is compromised to some extent, depending on their positions. I mean, the higher up you are, the more compromised you are. So, to answer your question about the jinn, yes, they're everywhere. The Masons know about this. Are you familiar with Masonic ritual?
No, please enlighten us.
Yeah, well...
if you can.
Yeah, I can. It just is... Well, I don't mean to be cruel, but here's what I learned recently after a show I did. It's funny how these things just sort of pop out. The initiate is taking on the role of someone called Hiram Abiff, allegedly the architect of the Solomon's Temple.
Okay.
And you are sworn to secrecy, never to reveal the secrets of Hiram Abiff, because in lore, Hiram Abiff was murdered by two people who were trying to get the secrets from him. See, they claim that somehow Hiram Abiff built the temple without using hammers or nails or making any noise whatsoever.
Mm-hmm. Any
idea how he might have done that?
Probably alien help.
The jinn.
Uh-huh.
King Solomon, it turns out, and this is in the historical record, so anybody can look this up. Hiram Abiff is not a real person. That's just that's a pseudonym or a cover story for the real architects of the Solomon's Temple are the jinn.
Wow.
So you know the whole thing. Okay, so in Western mythology, we look at them and call them genie in a bottle, right?
Yeah.
Everybody's familiar with that. Solomon apparently had found a way to bind, and he wasn't the only one, by the way, in the Middle East that has done this or claims to have done this. But there apparently is a way to capture and bind these entities to do your bidding. There's always a price.
Yeah.
There is a price. It's not free. I mean, these things really, they're dangerous.
The seals. Those are the seals of Solomon. Those are the things that bind them.
Yes, and that's true for Washington, D.C., too. The broken pentagram was designed exactly for that reason.
It's one of the seals of Solomon. It's built in the shape of one of the seals of Solomon, yes.
Yeah, but the broken pentagram is specifically to bind Satan to that location. Wherever you place a broken, when I mean broken, one side is open.
Yeah.
That's where that's like the portal that says, come in, come in. This is a safe zone for you. We secured this location for you to come in.
Oh, boy.
I got a drawing of it that's really fantastic from one of Manly Hall's books, and it shows a Masonic priest, Levy, I think his name was, and that's what he's doing. He's literally inviting one of these jinn to come into space. It's like the human has its space and its geometric symbols. Then you have the jinn, who is luminous being that is in its own space. That's slightly different. It has a slightly different geometric pattern. In other words, it's very distinct. They've always known how to communicate with these things and supposedly control them, but the truth is they're being controlled by them.
Yeah.
So it's a really stupid game, but that's what's going on in Washington, D.C., in London, the Vatican, pretty much all over the planet. And like I said, it's not confined just to this world. It's a problem that's going on across the universe. I don't think it's spread out throughout the entire universe. I think this thing was contained at some point, and now they're pushing back. They have been for some time.
Robert, what do you think the goal is for these things? What's the goal?
It's so simple. It's just survival. They're stuck in a place where they can't, it's just like you put some guy on an island, he's going to look for a way to survive. While they're here, like I said, I think they hitched a ride, and they ended up here quite accidentally. And so they are just simply feeding. And it's not any more complicated than that, although they have made it very convoluted because they do everything covertly. Mm-hmm. They know that we would absolutely unite against them and have been. Like I said, those who are not infected, they're well aware of this. Those who are still remaining divine. And, the Catholic Church knows this at some level. They say that there probably humans out there that are without sin.
Right.
Meaning that they haven't been infected by these parasites yet, in my opinion.
Right.
So it's going to get really interesting here, but I think that clarity is what is really called for, and also that means putting things into context. That's again why we're having this conversation, as off the wall as it may seem to somebody who's never heard of any of this before. This can all be substantiated, especially the jinn. If you really want you really want to have some fun, I mean that sarcastically, Google Muhammad and the jinn.
Oh, God.
And you'll find out that this is not my opinion. This is part of the historical record. Muhammad and his entire family were involved with the jinn.
Yeah.
These jinn are not really to be trusted, and they have the ability to, as it is described in the historical record, they can whisper into the souls of men, which, in my opinion, is a very bad thing. And again, this is exactly what other cultures have described these beings as, highly manipulative of our minds. Mm-hmm. And it's not for our benefit, by the way. Obviously, I mean, when you look at it, when you have the courage to actually examine this is, it's not really scary. And in my opinion, I think it's actually, I'm very optimistic. The fact that we can even have this conversation.
Oh, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
It shows me that we're on the right track.
Yeah.
Towards, completing the mission, right?
Yeah.
For us, for our species, the God race is really doing everything it can to reclaim this universe.
And what does that reclaiming look like? I mean, does it look like people? Well, that's the $1 million question that even Sarita and I have behind the scenes is like, what does it look like? Is it an uprising by humanity? Is it a consciousness shift? What does it look like? Because then they're not going to just leave and pack up and go.
No. In fact, they're holding this world hostage. Mm-hmm. They have told, in my understanding, they've told the divine beings, giving them an ultimatum, like, if you simply just show up and try to liberate all these people, we'll annihilate the planet. We'll just kill everybody.
Yeah.
Because, see, in their crazy, twisted minds, or understanding, is that they think we're their property. They control us. They have. They captured us a long time ago, so we are their property. Okay, so this, in their view, that is illegal to steal. If you're coming in to steal my property, I will take every measure possible to prevent you from doing that, including even destroying my property, so it doesn't end up in your hands.
Yeah,
it's completely insane and corrupt and cruel, but that's how they operate. So, like I said, how does it look? One of the things that they've been doing gradually is, like I said, bringing more souls who are aware to this world at this time, because it really kicks off this year. My understanding, again, if you read the Bowl of Light, you'll start to understand what the ancestors, according to this Polynesian teacher, what he was saying before he passed over, what he conveyed was really profound. One thing he didn't say, but I'll have to explain it to you, is like this. Our solar system, as you know, it moves around the galaxy, and that there's different levels of energy/consciousness. We entered what some people call the photon band, or photon zone.
Oh, yes.
NASA calls it the fluff. I don't know why, but whatever.
I know, it's ridiculous.
It is, but it's a cloud.
It's ridicule. It's just part of ridicule. If they don't want people to know anything, they ridicule it. They give it stupid names. They boo-hoo it. They do all of that. But that's especially when you need to look into it, is when something is given a stupid name like that.
Yes. So my understanding is, and of course they're trying to make people afraid of it, like, it's leading to climate change, and there's going to be another flood and all this garbage. Actually, what's happening is, they also say it's a huge cloud of energy. They call it charged particles, but it's energy, okay? And if you look at it on one level, it just seems hot, and they can't understand where all the heat's coming from. But it's what's causing the climate change throughout the solar system. Our solar system literally entered this cloud back in around 1960s is when we became aware of it. But now, all these years later, we're deep into it. It's literally, our solar system has merged with this giant cloud of energy. And so this is the time. This is the time for it. It's very uncomfortable. It's making the life even more difficult for our existence, survival, I should say, for these parasites. This is not a good time for them. Not a good time at all.
Well, that's a good
thing. Why they're working extra hard to keep us in the dark.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, so that's why people like you and Serena and I and all these other wonderful experts and authors and everybody, this information is coming out at this specific point in time.
Especially this story I told you about my friend as a pilot, innocently. Now the thing is, the military knew. Turns out the military knew that there was this portal. It's a lot like the Bermuda Triangle. There's actually 12 of these areas on the planet that are fairly well known. Some of them are far more active than others. But they knew this wasn't just a test of the plane, the jet.
Huh.
They knew where they were sending him.
Oh,
he just didn't know it.
Yeah.
Until he got back, and they were asking him all these questions. He's like, they obviously know.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to tell them. I'm not going to tell them about all these beautiful people living on this perfect island where everything is provided for them. There's not even a mosquito or a rat. It's like, what in the heck is this? So it's like, it's time. It's time for people to become aware that there's another way of life. The original way of life is not primitive in any regard. It's just pure, unadulterated bliss. Now, I'm going to give you a very quick example. I know, because that's the human potential, because that's the way God. That's when the seed of this universe was ready to bloom. That was the thought. That was the emotion. That was the emotional state that soul was in. Was what we can only describe it as bliss. Where it's so happy.
Yep.
So happy just to be alive.
Mm-hmm.
That it wants to share itself.
Yeah.
It wants to expand itself into many other forms of self. And so especially recently, there was this horrific massacre in Connecticut at the Sandy Hook.
Sure.
That morning, I had done a show on Coast to Coast. And I woke up, and I'd only had about an hour's sleep. I was kind of a wreck that morning, but that's what you got to do sometimes. And so I got up, didn't know what was on the news. Okay, I just got up, and there was a message on my phone from somebody I care about very deeply, and he had called just to say he heard me, and what a great job, magnificent. He's just thanking me for coming on and speaking truth to power. And as I'm listening to this, I just started breaking down.
Yeah.
I literally just started bawling, and I'm like, wait a minute, hey, come on, pull yourself together. It's just a phone call,
Yeah.
But something was going on. Something was going on. And now I could say, well, I literally felt the disturbance in the force. It's not funny, but I know those are cliche terms, but so I pull myself together. I go, well, I was thinking I must just be sleep deprivation or something, and feeling extra raw emotionally, right?
Yeah.
So I go upstairs, take a shower. Time passes. Something. Now I'm in the shower, and I started crying again. I'm like, not a little bit either, by the way. I was bawling, and I'm like, what is wrong with me? I'm thinking, God, what in the heck is happening to me? About an hour later, I go to a restaurant. Sitting there trying to eat, and I started bawling again. I'm like, oh, this is really embarrassing. I'm just sitting there, and I'm thinking, gosh, this. Come on, pull yourself together. And like I said, I didn't know what was going on. But as I'm sitting there, I see a family in front of me. There's a mom, the dad, and a boy. He was probably, he was sitting in a high chair. Okay, he wasn't a baby, but he wasn't fully a toddler. He was somewhere in between. And so the mom was passing him over some food. And at one point, he takes a piece of fruit, and he turns to his mom. And see, I can't see the mom. All I can see is the boy. And he has his look on his face like, okay, Mom, eat your fruit. So she takes it out of it. She literally just, she lets him put it in her mouth, right?
Mm-hmm.
As soon as she took that piece of fruit from his hand, his whole body contorted.
Oh my God!
Every muscle in his body went. He wasn't smiling. he wasn't smiling. He was in bliss.
Oh, wow.
I was so blown away by that. I'm thinking, oh my God.
Yeah.
That's what God is.
Yeah.
That's what God's a relationship to us. It's like we turn around and say, thank you.
Yep.
Here, you have some.
Yep.
And then it's like, it's just this, the reciprocity is so intense. It's like, there's this feedback mechanism, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the energy just starts cycling through. And like, I know the mom was thrilled too. She was like, and then I went home and I heard what had happened. This boy had killed his mom and then went on a rampage. And I'm thinking, okay, so that's what that whole lesson was this morning. That's why I was feeling so emotional.
Wow.
There was all these souls that were, let loose, under these horrible circumstances. And yet, in the midst of all this, this is so crazy about this world we live on, the duality. You have one boy who's absolutely in bliss from giving his mother a piece of fruit. It wasn't the fruit. It was just that act, that exchange
the sharing,
of pure, pure love. Mm-hmm. God, that was so beautiful.
Yep.
But, I can tell you this, but unless you were there,
no,
it's really hard to.
No, but I tell you what. No, you're telling me this, and I'm getting chills. You don't understand. I'm sitting here with chills up my legs, up my spine. I mean, it is like, oh my God, I'm right there living this with you.
Oh, good.
Oh, wow, are you kidding? Good. Oh my gosh.
So this is, see, but what did everybody see that day? All they saw, they wanted to, the Archons were so busy that day, just ramping up everybody's, as many people as they could. That was a feeding frenzy. That was a feeding frenzy for them. They because everybody was terrorized, like, oh my God, our kids are going to be massacred, in the school. And it played upon people's fears. And yet, the truth is, that's not what God designed this world to be.
Exactly.
Certainly didn't design us to be like that at all.
Exactly.
Not at all.
Yeah.
So,
wow.
That's what it looks like. That's the face. That's the face of the future. Is these, and that's how it was on the island too. When my friend was there for 6 months, he said those people, they never raised their voice. They were always happy. They were always healthy.
Yeah.
And that's the way it's supposed to be. Serena, did you have one question? I mean, we're pretty much down to the last couple of minutes.
Yeah. It's not so much a question as it is a comment. Robert, I've been listening to you, and I've been seeing that you have a very much alive emotional body, and that is really a joy for me to see. I just want to say that your examples that you've given of the times that you have felt emotion and the fact that you're still emotional about things that happened 30 years ago, that tells me that your heart is still very much alive. And I think I would like if you could tell me in just a couple of words why your heart, I think, has everything to do with why you're exposing this dark side. It's because the heart cannot live with the dark side, and it can't let others live unknowingly with the dark side, without understanding and without knowing. And your emotions and the fact that you recognized joy when you saw it, as in this little boy, tells me that you're still connected to the divine. And if you could just tell me in a couple of words before we have to end the show now, just what it is that you feel that prompts you to talk about these things.
Well, it's a responsibility that I feel, and it's not always really logical, but it is something that's in me that I feel like if I don't share it, I actually feel that's a sin.
Right. Okay.
So.
Yep. And I totally agree with you.
It's very, it's part of my relationship with this being too. By the way, they do hear us.
Yeah.
They do hear our thoughts. So I personally feel like every night it's important to connect with your higher power, because it helps protect you from these lower, darker entities, and it will empower a person if you consciously connect yourself at least once a day, or specifically at night when it's quiet, because you don't want to be distracted when you're doing this. But I typically say the Lord's Prayer, my own version of the Lord's Prayer, to the Father. And I visualize him and his light, and I say thank you. I'm not asking for anything. I'm saying thank you. Just thank you for everything.
Absolutely.
It's good to be. it's important to be appreciative.
Oh, absolutely.
Yes, it is. Robert, thank you for sharing yourself.
My
and
pleasure.
sharing your
Absolutely.
emotions.
And just real quick, I just wanted to let everyone know that Robert, of course, you can pick up any of his books, Close Encounters on Capitol Hill or Covert Encounters in Washington, D.C. on Amazon.com or probably Barnes & Noble as well. And please, visit his website, unicus.com. Is that correct, Robert?
Unicus Magazine.
Unicus Magazine.
Yeah, it's Latin. It's spelled UNICUS Magazine. Unicus Magazine.
Fantastic. Robert, it's been such an amazing and enlightening 2 hours, and I'm hoping that you will accept our invitation to come back at some other point in time. And God bless you for the work you're doing, and a lot of protection for you.
Thank you, and same to both of you, and we'll be in touch.
Absolutely.
Yes. Keep it up, Robert. Keep it up.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Serena.
Take care.
Bye-bye, Ari.
Bye-bye.
You too. Bye.
You've been listening to Shattering the Matrix with your host, Ari Kopel and Serena. Please visit our website, 2012emergence.com. That's 2012emergence.com. Find us on Twitter at Matrix Shattered and like us on Facebook at facebook.com/Shattering the Matrix. Listen to archived shows at blogtalkradio.com/Shattering the Matrix. And join us next time for the birth of the new golden era on Shattering the Matrix.